What it do, homies? We out here with some more lore. Pun, maybe. Every single Space Marine power armor type explained. Let's go ahead, shut up, turn it up.
Marines to Custodes, the elite of humanity stride into battle with the humming of fusion backpacks and the whirring of actuators, enhancing the strength and speed of the typically superhuman wearers to even more ludicrous degrees. Each of these suits is a precious relic, so pay close attention. We're not likely to get permission from the Inquisitors to do this sort of breakdown again. These are the power armor suits of the Imperium, starting with the armor that became the Mark I. This is the very first powered suit of its kind, and even before it was given the nickname Thunder Armor by the Emperor's lightning bolt-adorned soldiers, this armor was in use by almost every warlord on Old Terra. A thick breastplate protects the most important parts of the soldier wearing it and covers the many cables which transmit power to the arms from a microfusion reactor stored in an armored backpack. A backpack that is far bulkier and louder than later Marks, with well over half of its volume taken up by the cooling systems required to keep the suit operational. The arms themselves are the real powered part of this early mark of power armor, with the backpack supplying enough energy to the crude fiber muscles to increase the user's strength by up to 4 times their normal levels. In the original Mark I suits, these were the only parts to be armored so thoroughly, with maybe a helmet and codpiece to help protect other vulnerable parts, making the Thunder Armor not much better for protection than modern Carapace armors. They weren't even sealed. This is down to the way combat was pursued in the blasted wastes of post-apocalyptic Terra. Techno-barbarian warlords who built and distributed the original version of this armor preferred close-in fighting through the various ruined cityscapes, tunnels, and drifting space hulks that dotted the area around Terra, and the pressurized habitats of the Moon and Mars. That all changed when the Emperor decided to take charge of humanity's destiny, showing up on the scene with his proto-Space Marines, the Thunder Warriors, who were entirely clad in the newest Mark I power armor, complete with greaves that kept the legs of his troopers from getting slashed or shot.
I was about to say, man, you know, your mobility, right? Sure, you got all these 4-time Hulk and strong armor and punches and everything, but used to be an adventurer, you know what I mean? And y'all know how that ends. I used to be an adventurer, so.
Sure, they may not have been powered, but the introduction of leg armor was apparently so revolutionary that most of the Emperor's enemies started using the newer versions as well, right up until he defeated them, of course.
Wait. Hold on. Is that armor on his leg?
Thunder Armor may be rudimentary, but no other powered suit would exist in the Imperium today without the very first power armor protecting the Thunder Warriors who retook Terra for the Emperor.
Reminds me of Fallout.
The Mark II power armor was the first suit made specifically for the newly created warriors of the Adeptus Astartes, commonly referred to as Crusade armor for the fact that it was designed to protect the Emperor's warriors during the Great Crusade. The Mark II is the first fully enclosed suit, which for the first time allowed the Emperor's elite forces to fight in toxic atmospheres, survive poisonous attacks, and even advance through the void of space. Thanks to the new alliance with the Mechanicum of Mars, the Imperial forces were able to make use of the more sophisticated techniques and deeper knowledge of the tech priesthood, resulting in a more efficient backpack power source that allowed for armored cooling zones for all but the legs, which was a small price to pay for finally getting powered leg armor. The plating itself was created using bands of articulated hoops for increased maneuverability without having to give up any protection, a feature that makes Mark II armor still competitive well into the 42nd millennium, even though it also makes the suits hard to repair. And that's just the raw armor. Thanks to the Astartes physiology, including the Black Carapace, which allows a Marine to fully integrate with their armor, the Mark II was able to include a neural link, allowing the wearer to feel the armor like a second skin and use the sensory systems embedded in the...
I need to look at another video about this, right? That kind of just breaks down all the physiology. That right there is...
helmet to see and hear as though they weren't even wearing one. This came into play with deadly efficiency during the final moments of the Unification Wars, when the Emperor first fielded his new Astartes warriors to combat a coup led by disgruntled Thunder Warriors. Even though the older Proto-Marines were stronger and faster than the new Astartes, the more refined physiology meshed with this new armor saw them to victory, and the last of the Thunder Warriors were relegated to the past tense. The Crusade armor would not be made obsolete until maybe the Mark IV, or certainly by the Mark VI. By comparison, the Mark II is a sturdy, easy-to-make suit with impressive support systems. It's no wonder the Crusade pattern can still be found on the battlefield today. Now, before I tell you about the most brutal power armor in 40k, picture this. Gods, epic battles, and a game that basically feels like a Norse mythology fan's dream come true. Check this out. So, there's a huge event going on right now in Raid Shadow Legends called the Asgard.
I do sit through ads that creators do and everything. You know, I feel like it's the least I can do. And I'm pretty sure I've said this in other videos. I feel like it's the least I can do when like consuming content and everything. So, you know, just letting y'all know for future videos if you guys decide to stay.
Divide, running until November 22nd, and it's all about 4 new champions inspired by Norse mythology. Loki the Deceiver, Thor Feyhammer, Odin Feyfather, and Freya Fateweaver. Each one brings something unique to the table. Loki, for example, is all about deception and evasion, while Thor brings the hammer down with some serious AoE damage. And here's the cool part. You can get Loki for free just by logging in for 7 days before October 23rd. Plus, there's a limited time dungeon where you'll go up against Odin himself. Trust me, it's a lot of fun. I've been trying out different champions and team combos, and these new characters add a fresh twist to the game. I love experimenting with different combinations, especially in the dungeons and PvP battles. If you're into strategy and building the perfect squad, it's definitely worth checking out. So click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to get started. You'll also get a starter pack with the epic champion Grizzled Jarl, and you'll get another starter pack after reaching level 15 that includes an epic knight Errant from the Bannerlords faction as well. And don't forget to join my Clan Red Squadron so we can team up in the game. Stomping up next is the Mark III, or Iron Armor. The iconic brutal look of this suit is due in large part to the broad and thick frontal armor plates, completely foregoing the more agile articulated bands that made up its predecessor. This, of course, means that the Mark III is much more lumbering and stiff to maneuver, but that's not a problem when used for its intended purposes. You see, the Mark III isn't a true replacement for the Mark II. It was designed for a very specific purpose and meant to be used alongside the older Crusade pattern. During the opening years of the Great Crusade, the warriors of the Adeptus Astartes found that in order to fulfill their duties as the tip of the Emperor's spear, they would often have to fight through cramped tunnels and ship hallways or tight spaces. And so the Martian Tech Adepts came up with this modified Mark II design, featuring much heavier plates on the front in order to better protect the wearer from focused enemy fire in those cramped situations where there's no cover and no strategy other than move forwards.
Just tanking it.
For that reason, the Mark III was the first power armor that was mass-produced, and so was one of the most widely available patterns throughout the Great Crusade. Eventually, legions using the iron armor extensively could either be picked out as unsophisticated fighters, or as soldiers who had earned the displeasure of War Master Horus in some way, as he controlled the distribution of newer armor and other material, and so was able to mark out his clear favorites with better gear. This set the stage for the Horus Heresy, with many of the loyalist forces having been starved of newer armor. However, this still didn't give enough of an advantage to the Archtraitor's forces, for reasons we are about to see. As its name would suggest, the Mark IV Maximus pattern armor was intended to be the final and perfected version of Astartes power armor. The many advancements discovered and put into practice during the course of the Great Crusade resulted in several leaps forward in power armor technology, all of which combined to make an incredibly advanced suit. Here is where we start to see some of the familiar characteristics of what we are more used to in Space Marine armor. The banded and thick plating of the Mark II and III give way to the flat, smooth shapes of later armor sets. These larger expanses of armor sacrifice some mobility, but not a lot, especially when combined with the new flexible joints to aid in movement.
Okay. See, this is interesting. Like, I was wondering, how their body parts look in such hulking stuff. Huh.
New ways of armoring power cables meant they didn't have to be hidden under the chest plate anymore, and so weight was further reduced. And finally, one of the biggest advancements came from the new helmet. Based on the sloping design from the Mark III that deflected shots, the Maximus helm was also the first to not be secured to the breastplate after sealing it. Those new flexible armored joints finally allowed for Space Marines to be able to turn their heads with the helmet.
Michael Keaton.
Very futuristic.
Batman.
The big problem with the Mark IV was that while its basic construction was easier to maintain than the previous Marks, the Maximus was made to be top of the line with the best technology the Imperium had to offer at the time, and while that was great when supply lines were stable, this obviously wasn't a possibility after the Horus Heresy began. Once the fighting broke out, the legions who had been equipped with a large amount of these new armor sets found that they could not find the rare parts needed to keep their higher functions running, leading to an age of improvisation. The Heresy pattern suit is a bit of a misnomer.
Heresy?
It's not really a standard mark of power armor in and of itself. Rather, it is the result of needing to cobble together a sturdy, dependable, and most importantly, easy to maintain piece of war gear at a time when supplies were scarce. As its name would suggest, the suit that became the Mark V was developed during the Horus Heresy, and even though the majority of Heresy pattern suits were built and maintained entirely in-house by the Warring Legions, there was an attempt to codify a standardized version of the armor for easier production. Typical Mark V suits were made using parts taken from Mark II, III, and IV armor sets, heavier plating, cooling cables from the Crusade and Iron patterns, and as many advanced pieces from the Maximus design as possible. Some new elements will probably stand out to you all at this point, however, the most noticeable being those molecular bonding studs all about the legs, shoulders, and along the helm. These studs are an ablative layer that is designed to break off in response to massive damage as opposed to absorbing it. Unfortunately, they were also heavy, leading to the need for more power cabling to be added to transfer more energy from the backpack to the arms and legs, leading to more weight. You get the idea. Still, the extra protection was needed, and so the studs kept being used. Legions started attaching these studs as a way to protect their warriors from heavy penetrating weaponry of their former allies, as Marine-on-Marine combat hadn't been common before now, and previous armor sets hadn't been built for this sort of fighting. The other entirely new element added to the Mark V was the new helmet. Easily the most difficult thing to maintain from the Mark IV suits, the Heresy pattern opted to use a helmet from the Tactical Dreadnought design program that hadn't made the cut. While it wasn't good enough for the new Terminator suits, this helmet gave the Mark V a sturdy and capable alternative to the advanced Maximus helm that was getting hard to replace at this point. Now, it's not like Astartes legions had never been forced to retrofit new armors using parts before, but it was a very finicky process. The machine spirits of various suits don't like working together, and that leads to malfunctions. However, the deparation of the Horus Heresy bred this new suit that was not just easy to build without the need of a forge world, but could be supplemented with spare parts from other suits relatively easily. And that's why the Mark V ended up lasting long enough to gain an official entry into the long line of power armor variants. Regardless of the dark times it was designed for, the suit was adaptable and can still be found on some Marines to this day. As it became clear to the Imperial armor designers that the Mark IV was too complex and advanced to produce and maintain, a secret project was started that would eventually lead to one of the most versatile...
Oh, look at all this, man. See, this type of stuff right here is kind of exciting to kind of look at, like spread a blown out, exploded view of everything. It's just kind of going through and finding out what makes the armor.
Suits ever conceived. The Mark VI was at one time labeled the Mark V before the Heresy pattern was created as a stopgap measure, but from even before the end of the Mark IV's production, the armor that would become the Mark VI was in secret development and being field tested by the Raven Guard Space Marine Legion. The Mark VI was meant to use all those amazing technological advancements that went into the Maximus pattern, but this time focus on being robust, simple to produce, and have the ability to easily replace parts. And so, while the armor included new redundant power systems that allowed it to more efficiently transfer energy across the suit, and high-precision auto sensors housed in the conical beak-like helmet, The Mark VI also incorporated pieces of older designs in a way that made it robust and easy to maintain if supplies were low. The most obvious example was the inclusion of molecular bonding studs, usually on the left shoulder pad and sometimes the legs. This was of course taken from the Heresy pattern armor and used for the same reason. The studs were a cheap way to reinforce armor against marine weaponry, and they were an easy way to make battlefield repairs. But using the lessons learned from the Mark IV, the new armor suit was also built with dual technology circuits. So in the event of its very rare and expensive systems being damaged, a Marine force could replace them with more robust, if lower grade parts, from other armor until a repair could be made. These changes were made mostly in response to the field testing done by the Raven Guard at the tail end of the Great Crusade. The Stealthy Legion made great use of the much quieter running Mark VI, and as a result, the armor was named for their Primarch, the Corvus pattern armor. Rollout of this new armor was slow and complicated by the outbreak of the Horus Heresy soon after the first batch was sent to the Raven Guard as a reward for their service, but by the end of the Heresy, the Corvus armor was one of the most commonly seen armor sets in the Loyalist Imperial forces, and led directly into the next and arguably most iconic armor types. The Aquila armor is the power armor of the Space Marines. On every propaganda poster, stained glass window, and picked feed across millions and millions of statues, the Mark VII is what people see when they think Adeptus Astartes. And that is no mistake. This armor is truly the culmination of the technological revolution created by the finds made during the Great Crusade, and thanks to the Horus Heresy, it was almost the last major advancement in power armor technology in the Imperium for over 10,000 years. Following on the success of the Corvus pattern, Imperial armor teams decided on a secret development in order to make sure the Mark VII wouldn't fall into traitorous hands, which worked right up until Horus's push towards Mars threatened the project, and it was moved to the old laboratories under the Imperial Palace on Terra to finish.
Everybody's day.
The biggest difference between the Mark VI and VII is the chest plate. This thick plastron was made using even newer techniques, which let the advanced cabling introduced with the Corvus armor to be further protected under a strong chest emblazoned with the Imperial eagle that gives this new armor its name. A handy solar array was added so that the armor could operate for limited spans of time without its backpack, a very handy invention when operating behind enemy lines with a damaged suit. The helmet is also a new part of the design, regressing slightly in order to stay cheap and easy to make, but the best part about the Mark VII is its backwards compatibility. Taking lessons from the Heresy pattern armor, the Aquila armor is able to incorporate parts of the most previous marks with a bit of work. Although since it was made with most of the advancements from the Corvus armor, the Mark VII is completely interchangeable with no effort for that particular armor type. Having been delivered in secret to the Imperial Palace and finished hurriedly just ahead of the fall of Mars and the siege of Terra itself, the Aquila pattern was just starting to be rolled out to Loyalist forces during the most desperate moment in the Imperial struggle for survival, and it shined. The Aquila would stand tall for 10,000 years and be used as a base for many other armor types, truly the pinnacle at least until Belisarius Cawl showed up with his Primaris Marines. We're cheating again here, but since it has its own designation, the Mark VIII Errant armor gets its own entry. Following in the footsteps of the Mark III, the Errant armor is really just a fortification of the Mark VII that came before it, adding an armored collar to stop a rare occurrence known as shell trap. One of the only downfalls of the Aquila armor was that the neck joint was prone to catching stray rounds that bounced off its thick plastron, which led to more critical injuries and deaths than was necessary. A thick collar stopped that, although that change demanded a slight rework of the Mark VII helmet, which in turn stopped any backwards compatibility with other armors. Aside from that, however, there's not anything really special about this armor, so it's strange that it has its own entry, but we have no power over the administratum, so we'll just keep doing what they tell us. Due to an administratum clerical error, the number 9 has been taken out of circulation and no longer exists. Return to your work, citizens, and discontinue use of 9 in any of your future mathematics. Then comes the end of the 41st millennium and everyone's favorite meddling magos, Belisarius Cawl. As it seems, the end is finally coming for the crumbling Imperium. Call shows up with newer, better Space Marines with newer, better gear, and of course an entire Primarch to back him up. The Primaris Marines are bigger, stronger, and faster than Firstborn Space Marines, and so they required new weapons and armor, so Call developed a suit that could be changed and adapted many ways in response to the evolving battlefield situation. The base form of this suit is the Tacticus pattern. Almost every part of this suit is taken from the developments and best design practices of the previous Astartes Power Armor sets, and so there's actually not much more to say about this particular entry, with the notable exception of how the armor plates are attached. The ceramite plating that are usually solidly attached and arranged in other armor sets are instead very modular in the Tacticus armor. This allows plates to be taken away or added to the structure to allow for maximum tactical flexibility. For instance, the Terminator-like Gravis pattern variant is simply an up-armored Mark 10 with superior protection and decreased mobility. Then there's the much lighter Phobos pattern that strips armor in favor of greater agility and stealth capabilities. And there's the ability to mix all of these in various ways, leading to examples like the Omnis pattern, which uses Gravis-style legs for defense and Phobos-style upper plating to allow for the use of grav chutes and jump jets, leading to a very useful armor set for mobile support units like suppressor squads. The Mark 10 is currently the newest power armor suit that the Marines have access to, with more patterns and variations being experimented with every campaign, so it's hard to believe anything better could be devised. The absolute most protective suit of power armor available to the Space Marines is the tactical dreadnought armor, the Terminator suit. Developed during the Great Crusade, Martian tech priests used the armored bulk of the dreadnought war walkers and the heavy environmental suits used by engineers who have to work near engine cores and dangerous orbital microdebris. Thick layers of ceramite and plasteel formed the heavy armor plating, as well as external adamantine ribs for support. Enhanced sensors allow each member of the squad to see things from each other's point of view, and a whole suite of biological and self-diagnostic sensors gives out constant information about the status of each squad member and the integrity of their completely sealed suits. These traits combined to make an extremely robust suit that could be worn by a Space Marine, making them almost unkillable by all but the strongest possible weaponry. There's even stories of Terminators being stepped on by a Titan and surviving. Several designs were worked through before the end of the Horus Heresy stopped all progress on this sort of technology. The Cataphracti and then the Tartarus and finally the Indomitus patterns were and still are used to great effect as line breakers. The huge, thick plates made of layer after layer of ceramite and plasteel meant that if a squad of Terminators appeared somewhere, the enemy was as good as dead. And they did tend to appear, each suit having been equipped with extremely rare teleport homers that allowed Terminator squads to simply port down to a specific spot in the battle line.
Okay. All right. So you teleporting Hulks, teleportate. See, you know what? I was like, cool. You know what I mean? They're slow, so maybe, there's always a balance, right? There's got to be a balance, but they have teleportation. You got all that monstrous power and hulkiness, and you can teleport. All right. I mean, it says down to the battlefield, but still.
They crackle of lightning. It wasn't always spot on, but Terminator Marines were well trained to make the most of wherever they ended up. There are some rumors that the Tactical Dreadnought armor was originally developed to replace all other Astartes armors, meaning that the Emperor would have loved to have his millions of Space Marines to be thundering towards his enemies, wearing nothing but these extremely tough suits. And, well, if that isn't just the most terrifying thought, we're not sure what else qualifies. Thankfully for the enemies of the Imperium, creation of the extremely complex systems of this armor kept it from being mass-produced, and so each Terminator armor set in existence is a prized and cherished relic. The Space Marines aren't the only super soldiers in the Imperium, of course, and so this list wouldn't be complete without at least a passing mention of the Adeptus Custodes and their auric armor. Like everything about the Custodes, their armor and war gear is made to both a much higher standard than anything even a Primaris has, and completely secret.
They protect
we do
the
know
Emperor.
that each set is handmade and forged using auramite rather than the standard ceramite used by almost everything else in the Imperium. This makes the armor much stronger and lighter, as well as making it look as though it were forged from pure gold. The basic suit, if it could indeed be said to be basic at all, is a work of Baroque art, including the full name of the Custodes warrior who wears it, an air supply, and a built-in grav chute for drops. But it doesn't stop there, because the greatest warriors in the Imperium also have access to their own Terminator armor, an Aquila pattern made during the Great Crusade, and the Alaris pattern that's used today. Like the Astartes Terminators, these suits are incredibly tough, and thanks to the resources available to the Emperor's bodyguards, have more movement and agility than even some lighter power armor sets. Just one of these suits can be worth as much as a whole world. And that's hardly the only power armor in the Imperium either. Many other suits exist across a range of Imperial organizations for mortals and superhumans. The obvious first example are the suits of the Adeptus Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle. These holy warriors make use of sturdy armor with similar capabilities to the suits used by the Space Marines. A backpack power plant provides extra strength and mobility to the wearer, although without the black carapace to provide a total link to the armor, it is still just a suit rather than a second skin. Rogue traders and some inquisitors often hope to gain a power armor suit very similar to this, and these are often eclectic and impressively decorated. Inquisitors preparing to engage demons in close combat might gain access to the Holy Warded Malleus power armor. This is specifically made to fight the unholy denizens of the Warp. Similarly, the Astartes warriors of the Grey Knights make use of the Aegis power armor, which are essentially modified marks of regular Space Marine power armor with added spiritual protections and the inclusion of psychic hoods that protect the powerful Grey Knights while they use their powers.
Wonderfully named.
And finally, there's the Ratine armor used by the Sisters of Silence. Nulls used to track down and eliminate psychic threats alongside the Golden Warriors of the Custodes. Though not environmentally sealed, this armor is very similar to Space Marine power armor and even supplements that design using selenite void mail, a mesh of hardened silicates that allow a sister to maintain a high level of protection and mobility. And that about does it for the Imperial power armor sets. Like most things we cover here, there are still exceptions, unique cases, and armor that has been lost to history, but the list you've just listened to represents the best examples across the worlds and armies of humanity. Some of these suits and the times in which they were built could of course fill a whole video on their own, so don't be afraid to tell us which suits are your favorites in the comments below. And as always, do be sure to scan that subscribe button, activate that bell, and seal your armor in preparation for more lore. Again, don't forget to use the link or scan the QR code to get those bonuses and join my clan in Raid Shadow Legend.
Yeah, the next video I have to look at, right, it's got to be, and there's another video that I saw, I'm forgetting about what the creator was what would happen if every, faction won and whatnot, so I'm definitely going to check that one out. And then the other one is, of course, all the modifications in detail of what goes on, to the people beneath the suits, because that just looks like absolutely insane. More lore. This was very, very informative, right? I've learned a lot about these suits. It'll take some days to kind of commit some of this or some of it to memory, find out which one's my best suit and kind of move from there. Let me know what you guys want to check out next. Dave's out.